Back in the summer of 2010, Despicable Me released to theaters and kicked off a franchise that would basically print money for Universal. So they were desperate to capitalize on the success of the film in their theme parks and quickly began development on an attraction for the Orlando resort. By 2012, Despicable Me Minion Mayhem would open at the front of Universal Studios Florida. And in the years since, the ride has been cloned at every single Universal resort in the world. Beyond this, the Minions have invaded more areas of the park, gotten new attractions, and been at the center of Universal's marketing. But for such a successful and important franchise, I don't think their presence in the parks meets the expectation that guests have for them. Minion Mayhem is a rushed overlay of an open-gay attraction, and the ground-up Minion rides aren't better. Why can't Universal get Despicable Me right in the parks, and why is every Minion ride bad? When Universal first looked to add the Minions to Orlando, the parks had just come under full control of Comcast, making it one of their earliest major projects. This inexperience was combined with the longer-term projects also in the early stages of planning that limited the resources that Universal had to dedicate to the Minion project. Comcast also wanted this ride open quick, not only to capitalize on the popularity of the film, but also so the ride would open in the window before the Diagon Alley expansion. Universal wanted to avoid the attendance dip they experienced just before Hogsmeade opened by adding major additions to Universal Studios Florida in the years leading up to the expansion. 2013's edition was an already planned clone of Transformers The Ride 3D for the park, so Minions was going to need to open in 2012.
Universal Orlando's newest attraction is going to be based on the hit film Despicable Me, bringing Minions, Mayhem, an entirely new level of 3D family fun to you, our fans. The blockbuster film thrilled audience with its outrageous humor, endearing characters, and compelling storyline. We know Gru, his adorable daughters, and those fun-loving Minions will fit perfectly at Universal Studios Florida.
In this crunch, it was decided that the best way to meet the deadline was to retheme an existing ride in the park instead of building a new one from the ground up. This led them to look at Jimmy Neutron's Nicktoon Blast, which itself was a retheme of the opening day Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera ride. The ride was an early iteration of a motion simulator where guests would sit in front of a large screen as their individual benches moved up and down in sync with the film. By the time Jimmy Neutron's Nicktoon Blast closed in 2011, the ride system was over 20 years old, and similar motion simulators had popped up around the country. But Universal still wanted to find a way to reuse the attraction, so in an attempt to modernize it, Universal replaced the screen with a much larger one to hopefully better immerse the guests. They also made the experience 3D, and additional retail and queue space was carved out to create room for a holding room and pre-show to add to the experience. While construction inside was underway, on the outside of the soundstage, Universal had a decision to make. With the original intention of Universal Studios Florida to bring guests behind the scenes and into the movies, the main street of the park was designed as production central, with large sound stages and a production tram running through it. This meant the Minions would go into a soundstage-shaped building at the front of the park. By this point, though, Universal had already brought in new additions to the production central land, like Shrek 40 and Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket, that made the land messy theme-wise. So because of that, they made the choice to create a more elaborate facade with Gru's house and Minion recruitment posters over a sea of switchbacks, which cemented the death of Production Central's cohesion.
Check out these lines. All these people are waiting to be turned into a Minion. That's right, the new 3D ride Minion Mayhem is open at Universal.
3, 2, 1!
The attraction, based on the popular movie Despicable Me, allows riders to join this guy, Gru, who shows you what it takes to be a Minion. He walked the yellow carpet along with the Minions and the darling daughters.
Please welcome Margot, Edith, and Agnes!
The ride just may end with an awesome dance party, Minion style, of course.
When Minion Mayhem opened in July of 2012, guests would enter Gru's house for the first time and grab their 3D goggles to watch a pre-taped introduction from Gru in his living room. Gru tells you that you have volunteered to become Minions yourself and are going to be put through the test to make sure that you're Minion material.
You want to say none of the clock?
We're not doing the written exam, remember?
After, you move into the second pre-show, where Gru Overhead conducts a quick group interview before showing previous tests of turning humans into Minions that didn't go so great.
Although I kind of like that guy. And that guy. Oh, I love that guy. That guy really knows how to party.
But he assures you that all the kinks have been worked out, and after a quick scan, you'll be on your way. Except Gru discovers that some guests haven't showered and calls them out in front of everyone.
But you better shower when you get back to your hotel. And don't go right to the pool.
After that, Gru then blasts guests with his fart gun, which actually turns out to be a banana gun instead. The girls then convince Gru to let them handle the new Minion training so Gru can focus on a bigger project. Agnes is sad that Gru doesn't seem to remember that today is the anniversary of their adoption, even though she made a present for him. But Margot consoles her and ushers guests into the theater. Once sat in the theater, guests are turned into minions as their cars begin moving in parallel with the Minion trials on the screen. The new minions are tested on strength, speed, and their ability to not die. This is going well until they have to resist the temptation of a banana, which they instantly fail, sending them into a restricted area of Gru's lab. In the chaos, Agnes is trying to give the present to Gru, while Gru is trying to save the girls from the highly dangerous lab around them. The girls and new minions end up in the anti-gravity recycling room, and as Agnes's present floats away, she chases after it and catches it just between two pistons with spikes about to close in. Gru saves the day by overpowering the entire system to save his girls, and the minions catch them all as they fall to the ground. Gru opens the gift to find a doll of himself that Agnes made, and Gru reveals that the big project he was busy working on was a huge carnival to celebrate their adoption anniversary. Just as Gru is congratulating the new minions on their success and welcoming them to the family, a rogue minion accidentally turns the guests back into humans, much to Gru's disappointment.
Oh man, they're human again! Bring in the next group!
This wraps up the ride, and guests exit through a Minion dance party that occasionally features a Minion meet and greet. Following its opening, the ride got mixed reviews. The general public, for the most part, loved it, but to be fair, anything related to the Minions was going to be a hit with them in 2012. On a more critical level, though, the new ride was seen as a nice family-friendly addition that did its best to reuse the existing ride system and bring the Despicable Me universe to life. But at the same time, it wasn't seen as this ambitious addition to the park. It really played it safe, which just wasn't what the industry was expecting from Universal at the time. Nevertheless, the ride drew in massive wait times, sold ungodly amounts of merchandise, and did help mitigate the attendance dip in the lead up to Diagon Alley.
Inside each of us is a little bit of Minion. The part of us that wants to be mischievous, wants to run free. All you have to do is let it out. Find your inner Minion, only at the Despicable Me Minion Mayhem ride at Universal Studios Hollywood.
The success of Minion Mayhem financially in Orlando and the continued relevance of the Despicable Me franchise made it an obvious choice for expansion in the other Universal theme parks around the world. This started in Hollywood in 2014 with a clone of Minion Mayhem, this time with the extra capacity of 2 theaters since it replaced the previous Terminator 3D show. Unlike in Orlando, the area around Minion Mayhem would be turned into Super Silly Funland from the movie, which would include a flat ride called Silly Swirl, a kids' play area, and a gigantic billboard of Stuart the Minion overlooking Hollywood.
So no matter what time of day it is, I can't look out the window of my own apartment without seeing a minion staring down upon me from high.
Then in 2017, Universal Japan got in on the Minion action, but this time instead of building an exact clone of Minion Mayhem, Universal retrofit the experience onto the previous Back to the Future ride system at the park, which was similar enough to make it work. They themed the area around the ride to Minion Park instead of Super Silly Funland, and created a new flat ride called Freeze Ray Sliders. This was then followed up in 2021 with the opening of Universal Studios Beijing with a clone of Minion Mayhem still anchoring in Minion Land. However, the land was dominated by an indoor version of Super Silly Funland. This version was far more fleshed out than the Hollywood one and brought with it heightened expectations. However, when it opened, people realized it was still themed to a carnival, which meant a collection of off-the-shelf rides with minor theming. Mind you, this was nearly a decade after the opening of Minion Mayhem in Florida, and it was still the anchor of a brand new land in Beijing. Which was also the case this year in Singapore, when Minion Mayhem opened as the anchor of another Minion land. In Singapore, there were 2 additional flat rides that drew inspiration from the Minion side of the franchise, but the land was headlined by a clone of Minion Mayhem. This meant that Minion Mayhem became the first ride to be cloned at every single Universal resort in the world, bringing the Minion takeover global. At the same time, back in Orlando, Universal was looking for ways to replace Shrek 4D and bring a more cohesive feel to Production Central and the front of the park. By this point, the land was dated and really didn't fit in with the new direction of the park and the resort. There was an easy option on the table because Minion Mayhem was obviously the least expendable ride in the land, and the Minions' popularity was only growing. So Shrek 4D would close just after the holidays in January of 2022, and shortly after it went the Monsters Cafe. By the end of the year, Universal announced not just Shrek 4D's replacement, but also the creation of Minion Land to replace a majority of the former Production Central.
Some breaking news from our theme parks. The Minions are getting ready to take over Universal Orlando. The company just revealed plans for its brand new Minion Land, debuting in summer 2023. Universal says the area will feature the first of its kind family attraction, Illumination's VillainCon Minion Blast. They say the interactive blaster game will feature elaborate physical sets and innovative screen technology as guests compete against each other in a bid to join a notorious group of supervillains from the movie franchise. The ride will be located at the former spot of Shrek 4D. Construction has been underway since early this year.
Included in the new land would be Minion Cafe to replace Monster Cafe, a new bake shop, Freeze Ray Pops, and a new attraction called VillainCon Minion Blast to replace Shrek 4D. This expanded Minion Land would notably not include the Music Plaza and Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket, despite them being just next door with no clear division between the lands. Following a period of soft openings, the entirety of Minion Land would officially be open to the public on August 11, 2023, and reception was mixed at best. The highlight of the land was shockingly Minion Cafe, which served up unique and unexpected food that instantly made it one of the best places to eat in the entire park. It was also an early adopter of Universal's table delivery quick service model, which has become a staple across the resort since. On the more negative side though, VillainCon was disappointing to say the least. While we knew going in that the attraction was going to be a moving conveyor belt with interactive elements, it was hard to really grasp the concept without experiencing it yourself. In practice though, it's a worse version of a shooting ride in a park that has one of the best shooting rides in the world. The conveyor belt system, while good for compactness and capacity, makes it not even feel like a ride and more like an experience. The average guest enters that line expecting to be able to get off their feet for a second, but instead their feet are the ride vehicle. Beyond this, the blasters are heavy and the screens are basic and overly chaotic when there's more than a few guests in a room at a time. The whole attraction feels like a tech demo and not a flagship addition to a new land at the front of your original park. While internally it may not have been viewed as a major addition, it was marketed heavily and was going to be the face of the new Minion Land, which saddled it with unrealistic expectations that it just couldn't live up to. While Universal may have wanted Minion Land to bring a cohesion to the front of the park, what we ended up with didn't make the impact I think they'd hoped for, and I think many view it as a misstep in the middle of a golden era for Universal. So, Universal's Minion mistake isn't just one ride or one land. It's the collective disappointment in the treatment of the franchise in the parks. I'm not someone who dislikes the Minions at a fundamental level, even though I'm not personally attached to the movies. But I fully understand the appeal for their heavy inclusion in the parks. The Minions are massive, and not just with kids, but also their parents, giving this wide appeal that parks look for. I think there should be a strong Minion presence in the parks, but right now, I don't think that exists. Now, I know some will argue that Universal Beijing's latest iteration is the best execution of the concept and worthy of the franchise, but to me, it's not so cut and dry. While the land is undoubtedly the best in terms of its layout, kinetics, variety of offerings, and aesthetics, it doesn't have a standout attraction. At its core, it's a collection of off-the-shelf rides and Minion Mayhem. I don't think you can call a land this big complete without a major ride that goes beyond the expected. Imagine if Hogsmeade opened without Forbidden Journey and just had a quick retheme of Dragon Challenge and Flight of the Hippogriff. Or, for an example in the era after Harry Potter, imagine if Disney opened Pandora without Flight of Passage and only offered Navi River Journey. The land would have been a disappointment. Minion Mayhem is a step above the flat rides that make up the rest of the Minion catalog, as well as VillainCon Minion Blast, but it's not that same step above that other lands rely on. So while Beijing moved in the right direction, I don't think it solved the problem. But more focused on Orlando, the land was set up to fail the second that Minion Mayhem replaced Jimmy Neutron's Nicktoon Blast. It forced the land to take over what was essentially the main street of the park. Not only does this mean that the land has heightened expectations and responsibilities to set the stage for the rest of the park, it also means it has a terrible footprint to make an immersive land in. Think of every other park's main street. They're primarily made up of essential shops, services, and restaurants. They take on this very generic and IP-less theme that serves as almost a transition between the park and the outside world so that guests aren't jumping from their car right into Jurassic Park. They're rarely rides, and when they are there, they almost serve as like a thesis for the rest of the park. In place of rides, main streets typically feature a variety of kinetic elements around the land to keep things feeling alive. Essentially, main streets set the stage for the park in front of them. Universal Studios Florida never had a strong main street to begin with, but trying to create a modern IP-based land as your park's main street just doesn't work for me, especially with the lack of kinetics. On top of that, with the park's layout being built like city blocks in this area, it doesn't allow for the curves that help create borders between lands. Instead, you get this strange blending of Hollywood, New York, and the Minions, with jarring transitions around every corner. You have a music stage, Jimmy Fallon, Transformers, and Wicked all within view from basically any part of the land, which makes it really hard to call it a land. Plus, it gets even weirder for 3 months of the year when it has to act as the main entrance scare zone for Halloween Horror Nights and serve as the entrance portal and queue for a majority of the event's houses. While Horror Nights fans probably can overlook the Minion aspects of the land, daytime guests get this weird clash of brands. Along with that, it took the soundstage aesthetic of the former Production Central, which just doesn't fit the Minion brand either. If the land were tucked away like DreamWorks Land, I think it'd be easier to excuse the shortcomings of it, even if it was still a waste of potential for the Minions property. I mean, in the same park you have Springfield, which shares a lot of the same shortcomings as Minion Land. However, it's not a central focus of the park and easier to ignore and deal with its shortcomings as an older land. Acting as the main street also means that the first 2 rides that guests encounter are VillainCon Minion Blast and Minion Mayhem, which I don't think represent Universal's ride lineup well. To the average guest, I think these rides feel somewhat cheap and something that could be found at a decent regional park. Spaceship Earth, Runaway Railway, and the Hulk all do a better job representing their specific park's ride lineup and quality better than the Minions rides that just aren't up to the standard that Universal's been pushing. Minion Land in Orlando lacks the quote-unquote Potter wow that I think they really hoped for.
How cool is this? Giving you a sneak peek of Despicable Me Minion Mayhem here at Universal Studios. And yeah, it's in spectacular 4D.
It's a 3D motion simulator, but we've added the latest 3D technology. It's 4K high resolution CG animation in there with brand new 3D glasses, and it really brings the detail like you've never seen before in an attraction. So the whole area comes to life, and you really feel like you're in the middle of the scene when you're going through everything. We're thrilled. We're thrilled because we've been working on it for about a year and a half here, so we're just delighted to see the reaction we're getting from the guests. Everybody's having a great time, and sometimes you ride it and the younger guests in there say, "Save the present, save the present." So it's part of the story. So it's great to see everybody react and get into the story that much.
For me, this problem all stems from Minion Mayhem. It's the connective tissue between all of the Minion lands and the original sin that limited their potential. In an ideal world, Minion Mayhem is a solid supporting ride in a Despicable Me land and not the anchor. Whether intentional or not, it carries the weight that rides like Gringotts and Flight of Passage do. Minions is an e-ticket brand, and Minion Mayhem is its premier story-driven ride. Now, the ride isn't awful. It's just dated and kind of a relic of a different Universal. Ironically, I think that the improvements they made to the screen for the Minions took away some of the charm of Hanna-Barbera. Back in the original iteration of the ride, the screen was framed by real props that extended around the room, which helped guests not really notice the edges of the screen as much. On Minions, the edge of the screen is harsh, and when it catches your eye, you're immediately taken out of the story. While this decision made the screen bigger and allowed for 3D, the screen isn't big enough to be as immersive as something like The Simpsons, and the 3D was short-lived. But at the same time, the ride has redeeming qualities. The story of it I actually really enjoy, and I think it was a great direction to take the brand in. It has a clear narrative with guests feeling involved. It strikes a balance between the main cast and the Minions, and it has a lot of heart mixed with tension, which can't always be said of modern theme park rides. It's just tough that this story is delivered through nearly 30-year-old technology. I truly can't believe that the Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera's ride system got a new installation this year. I think the story is underserved by the ride system. Now, I know this is a pipe dream, but hear me out. Imagine if Minion Mayhem was a trackless ride along the lines of Remy's or Runaway Railway. You could have the vehicles dodging through the practical sets of the Minion trials with giant fly swatters, water effects, and lasers. This would make the slight thrills of the ride a bit more real while not crossing that family-friendly line. Then, for scenes like the Minion Bridge and Fall, you could utilize dome screens like Runaway Railway does to blend those practical scenes with projected media. A lot of scenes can also have their movement toned down, because in the original, you needed motion to sell the simulator even if the story itself didn't need it. In a practical space though, you can give guests the ability to look around themselves instead of having to move the camera constantly. Being able to really feel a part of these scenes would enhance the effectiveness of the entire experience and make the ride a true standout in Universal's lineup instead of what it is today. This whole video actually stemmed from a discussion on Twitter about how there's basically no Minion animatronics and what a missed opportunity that is. Bringing this world to life in a real way is possible and not as far-fetched as some of the fantasy worlds that Universal's already taken off the screen. But the idea of going back to an already existing ride that is still popular and pulling in high wait times is just completely impractical, and that's ignoring the physical limitations of the show building and that area of the park. I wish the rise of Despicable Me and Minions didn't happen to coincide with the gray area between two directions for the Universal parks. New ownership was excited to hit the ground running, but hadn't taken the time to learn the why behind their successes. The Wizarding World was so recent that Universal didn't really know what the exact reasons were for its success. In this case, I think there was a belief that part of Potter's success was the fact that it took a franchise that was still right in its prime and releasing new content, and brought it to the parks fast. And while that did probably aid in the success of the Wizarding World, I think it's become clear in the decades since that more of that success is owed to the design of the land and the idea for guests to step directly into the world of a movie. In the wake of Minion Mayhem's opening, Universal has taken their parks in a completely different direction. They're emphasizing real, thrilling, and immersive attractions that push the boundaries of ride technology. The Universal of 2012 would not create a park like Epic Universe, but it fits perfectly in their lineup in 2025. But I also think that's why VillainCon and Minion Land were such a disappointment to a lot of people. It was trying to salvage the 2012 version of Universal and bring it into 2025, but it just didn't have the ability and investment to do that. I think they would have been better off not making this a single IP land. I think an Illumination Land would have better allowed it to not carry those same expectations. It would have also allowed them to better blend the land into the park visually and also thematically. Instead of having a random stage in the middle of the land, it could have been tied into Sing. Minion Cafe could have still replaced Monster Cafe. And instead of VillainCon, we could have seen a clone of Secret Life of Pets from Hollywood, giving this classic, practical, family-friendly ride. I think this would have been the better outcome for the former Production Central land. But I think in a lot of ways, the executives saw VillainCon as a flat ride that could help round out the land, so why not go all in on this money-making property? But in reality, people expected VillainCon to be their second chance to create a modern Minion ride. So it ended up looking like a major step back in the middle of a series of steps forward for Universal. I feel so much more confident in how rides like Hagrid's, Monsters, or even something like Fire Drill will age compared to Minion Mayhem and VillainCon Minion Blast. While a quote-unquote fix for Minion Mayhem is too far-fetched, I still think there's a strong value in looking at giving one of the most successful movie franchises of the last few decades a more evergreen ride than what they currently have. While in Orlando, it's tough to find the space, I hope that somewhere around the world that space is found to bring the Minions to life for real. Then maybe that ride can become a Universal classic like E.T., where even as the park and the industry changes, the ride stays a charming fan favorite. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, click the like button, subscribe, and comment what you think a good Minion ride could be. Otherwise, I don't have much else to say. I'm gonna go eat some Minion tots for dinner tonight, and I'll see you next video.
I'll just get another loan from the bank. They love me!